I always prided myself on my ability to handle crises with calm precision. As a pilot, that was a necessity. Every decision I made in the cockpit had to be swift and informed. But nothing had prepared me for the storm brewing in my own home. It was a clear, crisp morning when Jenna left for her work trip. I watched her load her suitcase into the trunk of her car, her movements precise and deliberate. She leaned in for a quick kiss, a gesture I barely noticed in the haze of my early morning routine. I wanted to be the supportive husband, but the whispers I'd heard, murmurs of a questionable closeness between Jenna and Mark, were gnawing at me. "Take care of yourself," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "You too, Alan." "I'll call you when I land," Jenna replied with a smile that seemed a little too practiced. As soon as Jenna was gone, I set about installing the hidden cameras. I worked with a meticulousness that bordered on obsessive, positioning each camera to cover the key areas of the house. I knew it was a breach of privacy, but the doubts I'd been wrestling with needed confirmation. Hours later, I was at the airport, my mind restless and my heart heavy. The flights went smoothly, but I was preoccupied. I barely noticed the passengers or the chatter over the intercom. All I could think about was getting back home and sifting through the footage. When I finally settled into my study, I booted up the computer and connected to the camera feeds. I prepared myself for what I might see, though part of me hoped it would be nothing. The first few hours of footage were uneventful, just the usual quiet of an empty house. But as the days progressed, my anticipation grew. Then came the moment I had been dreading. Mark walked into the frame. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart thudding in my chest. Mark was supposed to be a friend, someone I trusted. I watched as he moved through the house with a casual familiarity that sent a cold shiver down my spine. The footage showed Mark and Jenna interacting in ways that were far too intimate. I could see them laughing, sharing secrets, and then, as the camera captured a private moment in the living room, they embraced. I felt a sinking sensation as their kiss deepened, confirming the affair I had feared. I was reeling from the shock when my phone buzzed. It was Tom, my friend and tech guru. "Hey, Alan, how's it going?" "I thought I'd check in on you," Tom said. I took a deep breath. "Tom, I need your help. I've seen something I wasn't expecting. Can you come over?" "Sure thing. I'm on my way," Tom replied, sensing the gravity in my tone. When Tom arrived, I was still reeling from the footage. I didn't need to explain much, Tom could see the strain in my face. "Hey, man, what's going on?" Tom asked, his voice gentle as he glanced at the computer screen. His eyes widened as he took in the footage. "That's Jenna and Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They've been involved." Tom nodded slowly, his expression sympathetic but focused. "Okay, let's take a closer look. There might be more to this." We spent hours going through the footage together. Tom's expertise was invaluable as he helped me piece together the details. As we scrutinized the clips, something unusual caught Tom's eye, a series of encrypted files on Jenna's laptop that Mark had accessed. "This doesn't look like a typical affair," Tom said, his brow furrowed. "These files could be significant. It seems like there's more going on here." I felt a surge of confusion and anger. The personal betrayal was one thing, but now it seemed there was a deeper, more disturbing layer to unravel. Tom's observation shifted the focus from a personal vendetta to a broader, more troubling issue. "We need to figure out what's in those files," I said, my mind racing with possibilities. "This might be bigger than we thought." As Tom and I began to uncover the encrypted data, new, unsettling truth emerged. Jenna and Mark were involved in something far more dangerous than an affair. The documents hinted at corporate espionage, and it was clear that Mark and Jenna were part of a larger scheme. The personal betrayal had taken a back seat to a new, more pressing issue. The sky outside was darkening as we continued our investigation, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on my shoulders. The storm of my life was far from over, and this was only the beginning. The revelation that Jenna and Mark were entangled in corporate espionage threw my world into disarray. What had started as a personal betrayal had escalated into a conspiracy that threatened to upend the airline industry. I was no longer just a jilted husband, I was now embroiled in something far more dangerous. The night after discovering the encrypted files, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with plans for revenge, but the more I thought about it, the more complicated things became. Confronting Jenna and Mark about the affair seemed trivial compared to the gravity of the espionage they were involved in. I needed to understand the full extent of their actions and find out who was behind it. The following morning, I called Tom, who had been invaluable in helping me with the digital investigation. His voice was steady, but I could sense his concern over the phone. "Alan, I've been going through the files, and it looks like there's a lot more to this. We're dealing with a network of corruption here," Tom said, his tone serious. "Yeah, I figured that out," I replied. "We need to get to the bottom of this. I'm thinking we should dig into who's been pulling the strings. It might be bigger than just Jenna and Mark." "Agreed. I'll start looking into the connections between the files and the airline's executives. We should also consider involving someone who can help us with the legal aspects if it comes to that," Tom suggested. I spent the rest of the day mulling over my options. Confronting Jenna felt like a distant second to exposing the network behind the espionage. I was torn between the desire to confront her directly and the need to protect myself and the airline from further damage. That evening, Jenna called. Her voice was tentative, a stark contrast to the confident tone she usually adopted. "Alan, I've been thinking. We need to talk," Jenna said. "I'm coming home early. Can we meet when I get there?" I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Sure, Jenna. We'll talk." As I waited for Jenna's return, Tom and I continued to dig deeper. Tom uncovered links between the encrypted files and a senior executive, Charles Thompson. The more we delved, the clearer it became that Thompson was orchestrating the whole scheme. We found evidence of unauthorized information exchanges and dubious financial transactions tied to him. When Jenna arrived, her face was pale, and she seemed nervous. We sat across from each other in the living room, the tension palpable. "Alan, I know things haven't been great between us, but I need you to understand." "Mark and I," Jenna began, but I cut her off. "I've seen the footage, Jenna. I know about the affair," I said bluntly. "But that's not all I've discovered. There's a lot more going on here." Jenna's eyes widened, and she swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "I mean the affair was just the tip of the iceberg. I found evidence of corporate espionage. It's not just about you and Mark. Thompson is involved, and it's a massive scheme," I explained. Jenna looked stunned. "Thompson? But he's a senior executive. How could he be involved?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "Tom and I have been digging into it. We've got enough evidence to take it further, but I need to know why you and Mark got involved in this." Jenna looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "Mark got involved in some shady dealings, and I was drawn into it. I thought I could control it, but it spiraled out of control." As Jenna spoke, I realized the depth of her entanglement. It wasn't just about greed or betrayal, there was a larger, more sinister force at play. "Well, you're going to need to come clean if you want any chance of leniency," I said firmly. "This is bigger than us, and it needs to be exposed." "I will," Jenna said quietly, nodding. "I'll help you however I can." The conversation ended, but the weight of what we'd uncovered hung heavy in the room. Tom and I had a new plan. We would need to collaborate with someone who could help us legally, and we had to be prepared for the fallout of exposing such a high-profile scandal. Later, as Tom and I went over our next steps, he spoke up. "We need to be careful, Alan. This is a huge deal, and the higher-ups won't take kindly to being exposed." "I know," I said. "But this is our only chance to do the right thing. We have to make sure the truth comes out." As we prepared to take our findings to the authorities, the enormity of the situation sank in. The path ahead was fraught with risk, but it was the only way to ensure justice and protect the integrity of the airline. The days after my confrontation with Jenna were a blur of anxiety and preparation. Tom and I worked tirelessly to piece together the growing mountain of evidence we had uncovered. Each new file, every email chain, and financial transaction pointed to a sprawling conspiracy that reached deep into the airline's corporate structure. Charles Thompson, the senior executive who had been at the company for years, was the mastermind behind it all. Thompson's scheme involved more than just siphoning off insider information to competitors. He had orchestrated a web of illegal activities, from compromising safety protocols to manipulating stock prices for personal gain. Jenna and Mark were minor players in a much larger game, and while their actions had betrayed me personally, Thompson's betrayal threatened the very foundation of the airline. Tom, ever the digital detective, had found critical data linking Thompson to offshore accounts, suspicious wire transfers, and communications with international competitors. We were sitting on a bombshell, but we needed to be smart about how we handled it. One wrong move, and the entire thing could blow up in our faces. One evening, after a long day of sifting through evidence, Tom leaned back in his chair and sighed. "We've got enough to go public, Alan. But we need to bring this to someone who can take action, someone with clout." "I know," I replied, rubbing my tired eyes. I was thinking about Rachel Carter, the journalist. She's taken down bigger fish before, and she's known for protecting her sources. Tom nodded. "Rachel's good. She won't let Thompson wriggle out of this. But you know, once this story breaks, there's no going back, right? Your name, Jenna's, Mark's, it's all going to be dragged through the mud." "I've thought about that," I said. "At this point, I don't care. The truth has to come out. Thompson can't keep getting away with this." Tom reached for his phone and dialed Rachel's number. After a few rings, she answered. "Rachel Carter speaking." "Rachel, it's Tom Roberts. I've got something big, and I mean really big. Can we meet?" Tom said, his voice steady but firm. "Tom, it's been a while. What have you gotten yourself into this time?" Rachel asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. But this involves Charles Thompson and corporate espionage." "Trust me, you'll want to hear this," Tom replied. There was a pause on the other end before Rachel's voice came through again, more serious this time. "Okay, I'm listening. Where and when?" We arranged to meet Rachel the next day at a discreet location. I was anxious. Exposing a corporate giant like Thompson felt like walking into a battlefield unarmed. But I knew it was the only way to stop him. The meeting with Rachel took place in a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of anyone connected to the airline. Tom had brought a laptop with all the incriminating evidence, while I sat across from Rachel, my palms sweating despite the cool autumn air. Rachel was a seasoned journalist, sharp eyes, quick with her words, and always probing for the deeper story. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. After a brief introduction, Tom opened the laptop and began explaining everything we'd uncovered. Rachel leaned in, her pen furiously scribbling notes as Tom navigated through email exchanges, financial records, and encrypted messages between Thompson and international competitors. "Wait," Rachel said, interrupting. "You're telling me Thompson compromised the safety protocols of the airline to manipulate stock prices? That's criminal. This isn't just corporate fraud, it's endangering lives." "Exactly," Tom said. "And it gets worse. He's been funneling profits into offshore accounts, and there's evidence he's been bribing safety inspectors to look the other way." I added, "Jenna and Mark were involved, but they're small players. Thompson's been running this operation for years. He used them to steal sensitive information and pass it to rival companies. He manipulated everything from flight schedules to maintenance reports, all for financial gain." Rachel's eyes flashed with anger. "This is massive. If I publish this, Thompson's career is over. He could face criminal charges, hell, he should face criminal charges. That's the plan, I said. But we need to be careful. Thompson has a lot of influence, and if he catches wind of this before we have the full story out, he could bury it. Rachel closed her notebook and looked at us, her expression resolute. Don't worry. I've taken down bigger men than Thompson. But I need you two to be ready for what's coming. This won't be clean. Your lives are going to get messy once this hits the press. I'm ready, I said, though part of me still felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. The days following our meeting were tense. Rachel worked quickly, verifying the information, gathering statements, and preparing the story for release. Meanwhile, I went back to flying, trying to focus on my job, but every flight felt heavier with the weight of the impending storm. Then, the morning came. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. The headline on every major news site blared the same story: corporate espionage scandal rocks aviation industry, senior executive Charles Thompson under investigation. I skimmed the article. Rachel had done her job. Thompson's involvement in the scheme was laid bare for the world to see. The details were damning, from the falsified safety reports to the insider trading. The piece painted a clear picture of greed, corruption, and criminal negligence. By midday, the fallout had begun. The airline's board suspended Thompson pending an internal investigation, and law enforcement agencies were involved. Mark and Jenna's roles were also revealed, though Rachel's article made it clear that they were pawns in a much larger game. They were placed on immediate suspension, pending further investigation. At the airport, whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about Thompson and the scandal. Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, they all shared a mix of disbelief and anger. That evening, Tom called. His voice sounded relieved. "Alan, it's happening. Thompson's been fired. I heard they're bringing criminal charges against him. He's not going to walk away from this." I exhaled, a sense of finality washing over me. Good. It's about time. Thanks, Tom. I couldn't have done this without you. Hey, we did the right thing, Tom said. Now let's see how the rest of it plays out. I hung up and looked out the window. The scandal had finally broken, and Thompson would face the consequences of his greed. Jenna and Mark's betrayal had set me on this path, but in the end, it had led to something far more important than revenge. I had helped expose a man who endangered lives for profit, and I knew that, despite the personal cost, it was worth it. The days after the scandal broke were a whirlwind of media frenzy, corporate restructuring, and personal introspection. The airline was in chaos, but amidst the upheaval, there was a strange sense of resolution. Charles Thompson had been arrested, and the corporate world was reeling from the exposure of his fraudulent schemes. Jenna and Mark were under investigation but were cooperating with the authorities, hoping to mitigate their legal consequences. I found myself in a limbo of sorts. My personal life had been shattered, but the professional world I had always trusted was now in disarray. I was still flying, but the turbulence in my life had given me a new perspective on the cockpit and beyond. One afternoon, I received a call from Jenna. I hadn't heard from her since our last confrontation, and her voice was tentative when she spoke. "Alan, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," Jenna said. "Jenna, it's fine. What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I wanted to apologize," Jenna began, her voice breaking. "What happened between us was awful, and I'm sorry for everything. I never intended for it to get this out of hand." I took a deep breath. "Jenna, I appreciate the apology. I've been dealing with a lot, and it's been hard to process everything." "I understand," Jenna said. "Mark and I are cooperating fully with the investigation. I just want to make things right, or at least try to." "Well, I hope you find a way to make amends," I replied. "I'm focusing on moving forward. It's the only way I can deal with everything that's happened." Jenna thanked me for listening and ended the call. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but her willingness to cooperate and express regret was a small step toward closure. In the weeks that followed, the airline underwent a significant overhaul. New leadership was installed, and rigorous safety protocols were implemented. The board of directors worked hard to restore the company's reputation, but the damage had been done. Trust had been eroded, and it would take time to rebuild. Tom and I continued to keep in touch, though our interactions were more casual now. One day, we met for coffee, a rare break from our previous intense discussions. "So, how's it going with you?" Tom asked as he sipped his coffee. "Things are settling down," I said, stirring my own cup. "The airline is making changes, and it seems like they're serious about improving safety." "That's good to hear," Tom said. "I'm glad the exposure led to some real reform. How about you personally? Are you managing?" "I'm getting there," I admitted. "It's been a rough few months, but I'm learning to cope. Flying helps, it's where I find some sense of normalcy." Tom nodded. "It's good to hear you're finding some balance. What's next for you? Any plans to change things up?" "I'm thinking of taking some time off," I said. "Maybe travel a bit, clear my head. I've always wanted to explore new places, and now feels like the right time." "Sounds like a great idea," Tom said, smiling. "You've earned it." The time off proved to be exactly what I needed. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of visiting, quieter destinations that offered a stark contrast to the high-stress world of aviation. As I wandered through ancient cities and tranquil landscapes, I found a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. One day, while exploring a small coastal town, I received a call from Rachel Carter. She wanted to check in and see how things were going since the scandal had broken. "Hey, Alan, just wanted to see how you're holding up," Rachel said. "The story's had quite an impact, hasn't it?" "Yeah, it has," I replied. "The airline is making strides toward recovery, and things are slowly getting back to normal for me." "That's good to hear," Rachel said. "You did the right thing. Exposing the truth wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "Thanks, Rachel," I said. "It's been a challenging journey, but I'm finding my way through it." Rachel's voice softened. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And enjoy your travels. You've earned a break." "I will." "Thanks for everything," I said. As I hung up, I felt a sense of finality. The scandal was behind me, and the world I had once trusted was slowly healing. I had faced betrayal, danger, and chaos, but I had emerged with a newfound clarity and resilience. The sky above was clear as I boarded my next flight home, ready to embrace the future with a renewed sense of purpose. The turbulence of my past had settled, and I was ready to chart a new course, one filled with hope, exploration, and the promise of new beginnings.